I used to believe parents would always love their children and that grandparents would do anything for their grandchild. But 5 years ago, I found out just how wrong I was. When my daughter's life was on the line, I begged my parents to help. We needed $120,000 for her surgery. They had the money. But they looked at me cold as stone and said, "We already spent $300,000 on your sister's wedding. Don't ask us for more." That was the moment I realized in their eyes I wasn't family anymore because I didn't marry the man they wanted me to. Because I chose love over money. My husband and I were struggling, but his parents, though barely making ends meet, sold their house to save our daughter. That day, I lost my parents, but I found my real family. 5 years later, my parents showed up again. Not with flowers, not with apologies, but with desperation. In this story, I'll tell you how I went from broken to unbreakable, how I turned their rejection into fire and built something they couldn't even imagine. And when they came back to ask for help, I didn't cry, I didn't shout. I just looked at them and said, "Remember 5 years ago? Stay with me." This isn't just a story about survival, it's about justice. My name is Selena Hartley. I'm 34 years old, a licensed architectural designer based in Portland, Oregon. I co-run a boutique design firm with my husband, though few people knew my name until the interview that changed everything. These days, my name appears in magazines, podcasts, and conference brochures, but long before any of that, I was simply the older daughter in a family where obedience was valued more than integrity. I was born into the Hartley family, known across our town for their prestigious furniture business. The Hartleys didn't just sell furniture, they sold a lifestyle, a polished image. My father, Gregory Hartley, was the kind of man who believed a handshake was a contract, and a tailored suit was a necessity even for breakfast meetings. My mother, Eleanor, was his social equal, graceful, controlling, and obsessed with reputation. Together, they ran the Hartley name like a brand, and as their firstborn, I was meant to be a part of that legacy. But even as a child, I was different. While my younger sister Sierra clung to our mother's skirts and memorized every cue for the perfect daughter, I questioned things. I wanted to build, not inherit. I read architecture books instead of debutante manuals. At 15, I was already sketching layouts for our backyard and proposing renovations to our showroom. I wasn't rebellious, I was just mine. And in the Hartley household, being your own person was the quickest way to become a disappointment. The plan for me was clear: attend an elite college, marry a powerful man, and eventually become the smiling face of the Hartley legacy. They had already chosen him by the time I graduated. Jasper Langford, son of a state senator, young lawyer, good hair, and a Harvard degree. Charming at dinner parties, smooth with a wine glass, and utterly hollow behind closed doors. My parents adored him. To them, Jasper was an asset, a ticket to higher circles. To me, he was everything I wanted to run from. By the time I met Malcolm Reed, I already knew what saying yes to Jasper would cost me. Malcolm wasn't rich, he wasn't connected, but he listened. He challenged me. He believed in building something from the ground up, not just homes, but a life. He was starting out as an independent architect full of wild ideas and late-night sketches. I saw in him the kind of dream that wasn't printed on luxury business cards, but poured into every square foot of a client's home. When I brought Malcolm to meet my parents, they didn't ask about his work. They asked about his family, his bank account, his lineage. Then they asked me directly and coldly, "Is this who you're staking your future on?" When I said yes, my mother burst into tears, not out of heartbreak, but out of shame. My father said nothing for a long time. He just stood, arms folded, jaw clenched. Then came the words, "I will never forget. If you walk out that door with him, you walk out of this family. Permanently." I thought he was bluffing. Surely no parent could disown their daughter for marrying someone they loved. I was wrong. Days after my small courthouse wedding, I received a formal letter removing me from the Hartley Family Trust. My name was erased from company records. My inheritance gone. My childhood bedroom was cleared out. Eleanor returned my wedding announcement unopened, marked refused. Sierra didn't speak to me, not even a message. Years later, she would tell people I chose my path as if love were some careless detour instead of the only road that made me feel alive. What hurt wasn't losing money or privilege. I'd never been drawn to those things. What hurt was knowing that to my parents, I had become a liability, a flaw in their perfect narrative, a chapter they wanted deleted. In the quiet months that followed, I learned what it meant to start over. To build a life not on expectations, but on choice. I knew I had walked away from security, and I accepted that. But I never imagined how soon I would be forced to return, not for myself, but for my daughter. Not to ask for love, but to beg for mercy. That moment hadn't come yet. But it was on the horizon. And when it did arrive, it would test every ounce of strength I thought I had. When I left the Hartley estate with Malcolm by my side, I didn't have a roadmap. I had resolve. The kind of resolve you only carry when you've lost everything you were born into, but still feel like you've stepped into something more honest. Our wedding wasn't held at a vineyard or country club. It was a short civil ceremony at a modest courthouse with no flowers, no catered meal, and no familiar faces in the pews. Just us and two close friends from Malcolm's side who served as witnesses. We moved into a rented one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Portland. The floors creaked, the windows stuck in the winter, and our combined furniture could barely fill the space. But every square foot was ours. We painted the walls together, built our own bookshelves, and sketched ideas for the design firm we dreamed of one day opening. In the evenings, we sat on the floor, knees touching laptops open, sharing plans and ramen noodles. We had no luxury, no family connections, no cushion, but we had each other, and something that felt like the beginnings of purpose. Malcolm worked long days picking up freelance drafting jobs, most of which paid too little and expected too much. I found work as a junior project coordinator at a mid-sized firm downtown. The pay wasn't glamorous, but I learned more in that first year than any school could have taught me. Every setback, unpaid invoices, client rejections, landlords raising rent, only pushed us harder. We weren't building wealth yet. We were building character. 2 years into our marriage, something changed. Not in our circumstances, but in our hearts. I was late on my cycle. At first, I thought the stress was playing tricks on my body. But one test, then another, then a trembling confirmation at the clinic changed everything. I was pregnant. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since walking out of my parents' house, Hope. Malcolm was stunned when I told him, but the kind of stunned that ends in tears and kisses. We spent that night talking about names, laughing about the chaos to come, and holding each other like two people about to build something far more important than a design firm. When Tessa was born, I remember her cry, sharp, clear, defiant. She was small, wrapped in a yellow blanket gifted by one of Malcolm's aunts, but her presence was enormous. I had never felt so terrified and so complete in the same breath. Malcolm held her in his arms as if he were handling a flame he would never let die. We didn't have a nursery filled with designer furniture. We had a hand-me-down crib and walls painted sky blue with leftover paint from a client project. But none of that mattered. She was ours. She was everything. The day after we came home from the hospital, I sent a brief message to my mother. It wasn't an olive branch. It wasn't an invitation. Just a simple truth. Her name is Tessa. She weighed 6 pounds 2 ounces. She's healthy, and she's beautiful. There was no reply. No flowers. No call. No card. A week later, a message arrived not from my mother's phone, but from an email address she sometimes used for formal communications. The message read, "You chose your path. Now accept its consequences. We will not be involved." It was signed coldly and with finality. Eleanor. Even then, I wasn't surprised. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel it. I sat on our thrift store couch holding Tessa while she slept against my chest, and I cried, not because I missed my parents, but because my daughter would never know them. Because no child deserves to be punished for the pride of adults. My father never reached out. Sierra, now engaged to Jasper, posted vacation photos from their European getaway the same week I was sitting up in bed recovering from labor pains. Her caption read, "Some blessings are too big to put into words." The irony stung. No one from the Hartley family came to visit. Not once. Tessa's milestones. Her first smile, first steps, first fever came and went with no recognition from the people who should have been celebrating alongside us. But she didn't lack love. Malcolm's parents, Robert and June Reed, were the kind of people who didn't speak in grand declarations, but showed up with warm meals, late-night help, and gentle advice passed down from harder lives. They didn't have much. A modest house in a working-class suburb, old cars that coughed in winter, and savings carefully tucked away in envelopes rather than investment accounts. But they showed up. And when June held Tessa for the first time, I saw something in her face that I never saw in my own mother's, a softness, an unconditional warmth that didn't care about bloodlines or social standing. Malcolm once asked me if I missed the life I walked away from. I looked at him, then at Tessa, sleeping with her fist curled around my finger, and said, "No. I miss what I hoped it could have been, but not what it was. We were building something slowly and imperfectly, and I believed for a time that hard work and love would be enough. I had no idea how wrong I was or how quickly our fragile world would be shaken." Winter had come early that year, the kind that blanketed Portland in a thin frost and crept through window panes no matter how tightly they were shut. Our little apartment smelled of cinnamon and warm laundry, with Tessa's drawings taped proudly along the hallway. She had just turned 3, a vibrant, curious little girl with wild curls and a laugh that could turn any bad day around. But that winter, something shifted. Her laughter began to fade. It started as a mild cough. We thought it was just the season. Kids catch colds. We made her soup, wrapped her in extra blankets, bought humidifiers, and checked her temperature 3 times a day. But the cough didn't go away. Then came the fatigue. Tessa, who normally raced around the living room singing to herself, began to nap in the middle of the day. Her appetite shrank. Her skin turned pale. She'd stop playing, suddenly clutching her chest and whispering, "Mama, it's hard to breathe." The first time she collapsed, it felt like the world split open. Malcolm wasn't home. I scooped her into my arms, still in my pajamas, and ran down the icy sidewalk to the car. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I sped to the emergency room, blinking away panic and praying under my breath. At the hospital, she was whisked away almost immediately. I waited in a cold plastic chair, watching the hallway as if staring hard enough would bring her back faster. When the doctor finally appeared, his expression told me everything. He held the CT scans like a sentence in his hand. "Your daughter has a congenital defect in her lung," he said gently. "It's compressing her airway. We need to operate urgently. If we delay, her respiratory function could deteriorate fast. We're talking days, not weeks." I felt my knees weaken. My mouth opened, but no words came out. "What do we need to do?" I finally asked. He guided me to the billing office, where a woman in a suit sat behind a glass partition. "The surgery costs $120,000, she said flatly, tapping on a screen. "Do you have insurance?" I shook my head. We had applied before but never followed through. Between freelancing gaps, rejected applications, and surviving month-to-month health insurance always felt just out of reach. It was a mistake I would never stop regretting. The woman looked at me, almost apologetic. "I'm sorry, but due to your outstanding medical balance from your daughter's neonatal care and the lack of active insurance or financial assistance approval, we can't proceed without a deposit or guarantee." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You mean you won't operate?" "It's policy," she said. "Unless you can provide proof of financial responsibility, the surgery is considered elective even in an urgent case like this." "But she'll die," I whispered, unable to hold back my tears. "She's 3 years old." "We're not denying care," she replied quickly. "We're offering to help you apply for emergency assistance, but that process could take time, and we can't proceed until it's approved." Time. That's what we didn't have. I stumbled into the hospital hallway, clutching the folder of paperwork like it could somehow save my daughter. Malcolm arrived moments later, face pale, hands clenched. We sat side by side in silence, broken people in a waiting room built for hope. "I'll sell the car," he said quietly. "The firm account has a few thousand. I'll call every client. Maybe someone can advance a contract." I nodded, but inside I already knew it wouldn't be enough. We could scrape together 20, maybe 30,000. But not 120. Not now. Not fast enough. I made phone calls. Friends offered what they could. Some cried with me. Others didn't pick up. The hours ticked by. Tessa lay in the pediatric ward, hooked up to oxygen, her tiny chest rising and falling like a candle struggling to stay lit. There was only one door left to knock on, and I hated myself for knowing it. The Hartley estate was still where I remembered it. A long driveway, hedges cut to geometric perfection, the house lit like a catalog cover. I parked the car by the gate and stared at the door for what felt like forever. Then I rang the bell. Eleanor opened it, still poised in a silk blouse and pearl earrings, as if the past 5 years hadn't happened. Her smile dropped the moment she saw me. "Selena," she said, not a trace of warmth. "What are you doing here?" "It's Tessa," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. "She's sick. It's serious. She needs surgery urgently." Eleanor blinked, then folded her arms. "I told you. You made your choices. This is the consequence." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," I said, my throat tightening. "I'm asking for help. She's your granddaughter." Footsteps echoed behind her. My father appeared in the hallway, wine glass in hand, wearing a look of practiced indifference. Gregory Hartley never liked mess. He liked control. "What is this?" he asked. "Tessa needs a lung surgery," I said. "The hospital won't proceed without a deposit. It's 120,000. I know you can afford it." Gregory didn't even flinch. "We already committed 300,000 to Sierra's wedding. That's this weekend." My mouth went dry. "Are you saying you can't help? Because you spent it on a party?" "She made her choices," Eleanor said coldly. "And so did you." I dropped to my knees. I didn't care that I looked pathetic. I didn't care that the neighbors might see. "I'm begging you," I said. "Please. She's a child. She's innocent." Gregory looked away. Eleanor turned and walked back into the house. The door closed. I sat there on the doorstep in the cold, tears blurring my vision, listening to the sounds of laughter and music inside. I wasn't their daughter anymore. And Tessa, my sweet, bright little girl, was nothing more than a reminder of my disobedience. I stood up slowly, wiped my face, and walked to my car. I didn't look back. I still had one family left. And though they had little, I prayed they had something even more valuable: heart. The cold drizzle had turned into a steady rain by the time Selena pulled up to the Hartley estate once more. Her hands clutched the steering wheel tightly, her eyes red from crying, but there was no more time to break down. She knew she should have never come back, not after the door had closed in her face. But after the hospital's firm refusal, and with Tessa's weak breath echoing in her ears, she had no pride left to hold on to. This time it wasn't just about asking, it was about pleading. The security gates were open and music floated out into the damp evening air, violins, soft jazz laughter, clinking glasses. Light spilled from every window of the grand home, casting a warm golden glow over the manicured hedges and stone pathways. Selena stepped out of the car into the mud, her heels sinking slightly as she walked up the path. She hadn't even realized what night it was, until she saw the floral arch, the photographers, and the crowd of elegantly dressed guests gathered beneath a lavish white tent set up in the garden. It was an engagement party, Sierra's. And standing beside her, holding her hand like a trophy, was Jasper Langford. The realization hit Selena like a punch to the chest. Her parents hadn't just rejected her, they had taken the man they once arranged for her and given him to Sierra along with everything else. And now they were celebrating with champagne and catered hors d'oeuvres while Tessa lay in a hospital bed struggling to breathe. She walked through the crowd without caring who stared. The string quartet faltered slightly as she passed, and murmurs spread quickly. Her hair was wet. Her dress clung to her skin, and she carried no grace, only desperation. Her father noticed her first standing near the champagne fountain, laughing with a group of guests. His face froze the moment he saw her. Selina walked straight to him. "Dad," she said, barely managing to keep her voice steady. "Please, I need your help." Gregory's expression turned stony. "Not here, Selina." "It's Tessa," she said louder. Guests turned. The music lowered slightly. "She needs emergency surgery, $120,000. The hospital won't operate until we pay." Eleanor appeared beside him, her eyes narrowing. "You need to leave." "I don't need all of it," Selina said, her voice breaking. "Just a portion. A loan. Anything. I'll sign whatever you want." Sierra, radiant in a champagne-colored dress, turned from the center of the gathering, her arm still laced with jaspers. Their eyes met. For a second, Selina thought she saw a flicker of guilt, but Sierra looked away just as quickly as if she hadn't seen her sister at all. "I am begging you," Selina said, dropping to her knees in front of them. The hem of her dress soaked through. Mud stained her palms as she clutched at her father's sleeve. "Please, you're spending $300,000 on this party. Can't you spare some to save her?" Gregory's jaw tightened. He glanced around at the guests who now watched in stunned silence. "You think I'm going to cancel this engagement celebration after the money we've poured into it?" "Into our image," he said coldly. "No, Selina. We've invested too much to be humiliated tonight." Selina looked up at him, soaked to the bone, her hands trembling. "She's your granddaughter." "You made your choice," Eleanor said quietly. "You walked out of this family the day you chose him. She's a child." Jasper stepped forward, perfectly composed in his tailored suit. He gave her a condescending smirk, the same one he wore years ago when she turned him down. "And yet, here you are, begging. Must be hard knowing you picked the wrong man and now your daughter's paying the price." Selina stared at him, too stunned to respond. "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else," he continued. "Now you're here ruining your sister's big night, begging for scraps. Still making all the wrong choices, Selina." Sierra turned her face away. Not a word. Not a glance. As if her sister's suffering was nothing but an inconvenient stain on her perfect evening. Selina stood slowly, her legs shaky, her breath ragged. The crowd parted silently as she walked back through them, their whispers cutting deeper than the rain now falling harder than ever. No one stopped her. No one offered a hand. As she reached the edge of the lawn, lightning cracked across the sky, followed by a low, rolling thunder. The white tent glowed behind her like a dream she'd never belonged to, full of people who once called her daughter sister friend. The storm matched her heart. Each drop of rain felt like grief made real, soaking her skin, stinging her eyes. By the time she reached the car, she could barely see the road through her tears. She gripped the steering wheel and let out a sob that came from someplace deep, someplace old. She had begged. She had knelt. She had stripped herself of every shred of dignity, and they had turned their backs. Again. But somewhere inside, beneath the pain, a fire sparked, because she still had Tessa. And this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else. The storm had passed, but the heaviness in Selina's chest had not. She barely remembered the drive back from the Hartley estate, only the hollow silence that hung inside the car like thick fog. When she arrived at the hospital, her legs carried her in as if on instinct. The white hallway lights buzzed overhead, and the sound of machines' quiet conversations and distant beeping seemed almost unreal, like she had stepped out of one world into another. The doctor met her at the nurses' station with a gentle shake of the head. "They still won't proceed without the deposit," he said softly but firmly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reed." Selina just nodded. Her voice had long since broken. She stepped into the room where Tessa lay pale and tired, a tangle of tubes and wires resting against her tiny chest. Malcolm sat beside her, holding her small hand, whispering promises he couldn't afford to keep. He looked up at Selena and didn't need to ask. Her silence said it all. But as the world around them threatened to collapse, something unexpected happened. That evening, as Selena sat by the vending machine with her head in her hands, her phone buzzed. A message from Malcolm's mother, Ruth. "We're on our way. Don't give up." Selena barely had time to process the words before Ruth and Edgar appeared through the hospital doors. They looked worn, tired, their coats still wet from the rain, but there was a calm determination in their eyes. Ruth hugged Selena tightly while Edgar walked over to Malcolm, placing an envelope in his hand. "It's not much," he said quietly, "but it's a start." Selena opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. Where did this come from?" she whispered. Edgar cleared his throat, glancing away. "We sold the land behind our house, the garden plot. It's been in the family for a long time, but Tessa is more important." Selena couldn't hold back the tears. These people who owed her nothing, who had no inheritance to give, no fortune to fall back on, had just given everything. "I don't deserve this," she said, her voice cracking. "You shouldn't have to." "You're our family," Ruth interrupted. "You, Malcolm, and Tessa. That's all that matters." The next few days felt like a whirlwind. Word spread first among the staff at the preschool where Selena used to volunteer, then among the neighbors in their apartment complex. People came by quietly, handing over small donations. $20, $50. Some brought groceries. Others just left envelopes taped to their door. A friend from Selena's college days sent $500 with a note. "We haven't spoken in years, but I saw your post. I hope it helps." A retired teacher from the neighborhood slipped Selena $200 in cash and said, "This isn't charity, it's love." Then one evening, a woman in scrubs approached her in the hospital cafeteria. Selena didn't recognize her at first, but the woman smiled. "You probably don't remember me. We worked together briefly when you did event design for the community center. You helped me plan my daughter's quinceañera. I never forgot your kindness." She handed Selena a folded check for $1,000. "I heard about Tessa. This is for her." It was overwhelming, humbling. People she barely knew or had once known long ago showed up not with grand gestures but with open hearts. And each act of kindness chipped away at the bitterness that had been building inside her since that night at the engagement party. One morning, as Selena watched the balance on their GoFundMe page tick up by another $1,000, she turned to Malcolm and whispered, "I can't believe it. It's actually happening." He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, his eyes tired but grateful. "They believe in us. In her." The hospital administrators, after reviewing the total funds raised and seeing the influx of support, agreed to begin scheduling the surgery. They allowed a payment plan for the remaining amount, moved by the overwhelming effort of their community. On the day before the operation, Selena stood by Tessa's bedside, watching her daughter sleep peacefully for the first time in days. The machine still beeped, but the tone no longer felt like a countdown. It felt like a promise. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from one of Malcolm's old co-workers. "I saw your story. I know it's not much, but I wanted to help. My kid was in NICU for 2 weeks. Strangers helped me. I'm paying it forward." Attached was a screenshot of a $500 transfer. Selena placed a hand over her mouth and let herself cry, not out of fear or pain, but out of something deeper. Gratitude. Awe. She sat beside Malcolm and whispered, "Do you realize what this means? People I've never shared blood with gave more than the ones who raised me." He nodded. "Sometimes family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when everything falls apart." Selena reached for his hand and held it tightly. In that moment, she understood something she had never dared to believe before. Love, real love, wasn't tied to lineage. It didn't live in shared names or family trees. It lived in acts, in sacrifice, in the quiet, unwavering resolve of those who stood by you when no one else would. And thanks to them, thanks to this new family they had found in the most unexpected places Tessa would live. The surgery was a success, and Tessa's breathing grew stronger with each passing day. Her cheeks regained color, and the once constant wheeze in her chest faded into quiet, steady breaths. Selena spent hours at her daughter's bedside watching her sleep, memorizing every rise and fall of her chest like a sacred rhythm. For the first time in weeks, fear no longer ruled her every heartbeat. But in its place, something else took root, a deep, simmering fire that refused to be ignored. Selena had faced rejection, public humiliation, and the raw vulnerability of kneeling before her own family only to be told she and her daughter weren't worth saving. No apology came afterward, no message, no acknowledgement, just silence. And that silence became a weight she carried even after Tessa left the hospital. She had survived, yes, but the wound ran deeper than any physical ailment. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being discarded like she didn't matter, that her child's life didn't matter. Every time Selena walked past the mirror, she saw not weakness, but the face of a woman who had begged broken and still stood back up. She promised herself she would never again be in a position to beg anyone for anything. And from that moment forward, she began to rebuild not just her life, but herself. She started slowly. During the nights when Tessa was finally sleeping and Malcolm caught a few hours of rest, Selena opened her laptop. She signed up for free courses: brand management, interior design, software, digital marketing, personal finance. She read ebooks borrowed from the public library about entrepreneurship, watched videos of other small business owners telling their stories of success, and studied case studies of boutique design firms that had carved out their place in the industry. Malcolm noticed the change almost immediately. She began taking notes, mapping out ideas, scribbling in journals, bookmarking articles. One night he found her sketching a new logo, 2 intertwined initials, R plus H, encased in a clean circle. "Read plus heart," he asked. Selena looked up, smiling. "To honor where we came from and to reclaim what they tried to erase." It was more than just a name. It was her way of saying that even if the Hartleys had disowned her, she was still standing. And the name would live on not through their money or approval, but through something she built with her own hands. They rebranded their small design service into Read Plus Heart, focusing on accessible, elegant spaces for working families. It started modestly: small apartments, local businesses, daycares, churches. Selena handled client communication and project planning, while Malcolm focused on the designs and on-site coordination. They turned their living room into an office, and Tessa's giggles became the background music of every Zoom call. Selena's routine became relentless but driven by purpose. She woke at 4:00 a.m. daily. She'd brew coffee in silence, reviewing course materials before the sun rose. By 6:00 a.m., she was planning social media content or emailing leads. From mid-morning until evening, she juggled meetings, on-site walkthroughs, and client presentations. At night, after dinner and bedtime stories, she'd return to her studies or refine business proposals until her eyes blurred. There were days her body ached, her back stiff from hunching over plans, her fingers raw from typing. But she refused to stop. She'd been humiliated in front of dozens of people who whispered and sneered while she wept, and she would never let that version of herself define her future. Someday, she whispered to herself during a late-night study session, "They'll know what they lost. And I'll know I didn't lose anything worth keeping." Despite their tight budget, Selena insisted they reinvest every penny they could into the business. They upgraded their website, refined their brand visuals, and hired a freelance accountant to help them build a long-term financial plan. Clients began to notice the professionalism, the precision, and the heart behind every project. One client, a single mother starting a bakery, hugged Selena after a project was completed and said, "You didn't just give me a shop, you gave me hope." That single sentence told Selena she was on the right path. She didn't just want success to prove the Hartleys wrong. She wanted to build something enduring, something that her daughter could be proud of. She wanted Tessa to grow up knowing that even when others turned their backs, her mother never stopped moving forward. As the Reed plus Hart name quietly spread across their corner of the state, Selena didn't seek revenge. Not yet. That wasn't the fuel anymore. What drove her was the image of her daughter alive and thriving. What sustained her was the knowledge that while some people clung to appearances and cold prestige, others gave everything for love, and that was the legacy she wanted to carry forward. And so she did. But the world, as it always does, would soon circle back. The Hartleys were watching. The cracks in their perfect image would begin to show. And Selena, though, focused on her business and her family, would be ready. 3 years had passed since the night Selena sat by Tessa's hospital bed, promising herself she would never again be at the mercy of anyone. What began as late-night studying and client calls from a modest rental apartment had now evolved into something far greater than she had dared to imagine. Reed plus Hart was no longer just a name, it was a brand recognized across Texas for its tasteful, affordable, and heart-centered designs. They had opened their own studio downtown. Their team had grown from 2 to 15. And just last week, Selena watched the company's annual revenue cross the $1 million threshold for the first time. The number itself didn't make her emotional. What did was remembering the brokenness from which it all rose. Each milestone, each contract signed, each glowing review, they weren't just wins for a business. They were proof that dignity, love, and perseverance could survive betrayal. She no longer woke at 4:00 a.m. out of necessity, but she still did it out of habit. And one of those quiet mornings with the early light pouring into her home office, Selena opened an email from the Texas Interior Design Association. The subject line read, "Congratulations, Ms. Selena Reed Woman of Creative Excellence Award." At first she thought it was some kind of promotional newsletter, but as she read the email, her breath caught. The award wasn't just a token. It was their highest annual recognition for innovation, community service, and resilience in business. Her story had reached them. Her work had spoken louder than her name ever could. The award ceremony was held at a modest but elegant hotel ballroom in Dallas. When her name was announced, she stepped up in a crisp navy dress, her speech handwritten on a folded note in her palm. But when she reached the stage, she didn't look at the paper. She looked straight at the audience, strangers, fellow designers, industry heads, and spoke from her heart. "I'm not here because I had resources. I'm here because I had people who believed in me when I had nothing. And to them, I owe everything." She didn't name the Hartleys. She didn't need to. The story behind her firm had become well known in professional circles. It was the talk of networking events how one woman disowned by a wealthy family had built a design brand from scratch while raising a child and caring for aging in-laws. How she returned every dollar she borrowed without being asked, because that was the next step. With their business finally stable and thriving, Selena made a list. On it were 27 names, neighbors, former colleagues, even a few acquaintances who had quietly slipped cash into her hand when she needed it most. Over the following weeks, each one received a handwritten letter, a check that was double what they had given her, and an invitation. The invitation wasn't just to celebrate her success. It was to become part of it. Each of them was offered the chance to invest in Reed plus Hart's upcoming community design program, a branch dedicated to revitalizing underserved neighborhoods using sustainable, cost-effective solutions. Many declined the money, their eyes misting as they held the check. "You've already paid us back in full just by thriving," one old friend said. But Selena insisted. This wasn't charity, it was principle. When the world had turned its back, these were the people who leaned in. And then came the dinner. It was Malcolm's idea to host a small thank you gathering for the Reed family, the people who had given up everything for Tessa. Selena didn't know what to cook, how to decorate, or what to say. She felt for the first time in years, nervous. When Edgar and Ruth arrived, Tessa ran out to greet them, now 8 years old and full of life. They sat around the dinner table in the new house Selena had bought just a few months earlier. It wasn't extravagant, but it was theirs, spacious, sunlit, and filled with the warmth that no mansion could imitate. After dessert, Selena stood up, reached beneath her chair, and pulled out a small wooden box. She placed it on the table and opened it slowly. Inside was a deed. Ruth blinked, confused. Edgar adjusted his glasses, leaning in to read. Selina spoke quietly. "I bought back your land. The one you sold to save Tessa. It's yours again." Ruth covered her mouth with her hands. Edgar's eyes stayed fixed on the paper for a long time before he said anything. "We never wanted it back. All we ever wanted was to see you and Tessa well." Selina's voice cracked for the first time that evening. "You gave up your security for mine. This is the least I can do." There was silence, the kind that carried more meaning than words ever could. And then Edgar looked at her with a softness that was never fragile, only steady and sure. "We never once doubted you, Selina. Never." And in that moment, she wept. Not from pain, not from exhaustion, but from a quiet, overwhelming gratitude that filled her chest like sunlight after a long storm. It was the first time in years she had cried at the dinner table, not out of grief, but because she finally felt whole. Selina had just wrapped up a strategy meeting with Malcolm and their legal counsel when her phone buzzed quietly on the edge of her desk. She wasn't in the mood to answer another vendor inquiry or digital ad proposal, so she ignored it until the meeting ended. As she finally picked it up, her eyes scanned the screen and froze. A single message stood glaring on her screen from a number she didn't recognize. "If she gives us the money, the house would be ours by now." A chill ran through her. The message was clearly not meant for her. Then the name popped up: Sierra Hartley, her sister, her blood. Selina sat in silence. No follow-up, no apology, no "oops, wrong person." Just that message, cold and calculating, as if Selina were just a pawn in someone else's private scheme. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the phone or break into tears. Instead, she opened her photo app, took a screenshot, and calmly filed it into a private folder she labeled Lessons. There were no words needed. That message wasn't simply a mistake. It was a revelation. And it didn't surprise her, not really. It only confirmed what she had already begun to suspect, that her family hadn't changed. That their perfect brunch photos and carefully staged captions were just a facade, a way to paint over rotting wood with a fresh coat of glossy denial. Weeks earlier, she had noticed the first ripples. Jasper Langford, Sierra's now husband, was making headlines again, but not the kind that earned applause. Accusations of financial mismanagement, client fraud, and tax evasion were swirling through legal circles like wildfire. His once prominent firm had shuttered offices. Lawsuits were stacking. Selina saw the stories and remembered the smirk on Jasper's face as he watched her beg on her knees 5 years ago. She remembered how Sierra turned away in silence. The cruelty, the arrogance. Now it was all unraveling. Jasper's fall was public. His name, once associated with prestige and power, was being dragged through the mud by the very people who once toasted his success. Sierra's social media disappeared for 2 weeks. Then, like nothing had happened, the Hartleys began to post again, a family garden party complete with string lights and catered pastries. A photo of Gregory holding a champagne glass, Eleanor laughing beside him, Sierra smiling tight-lipped. The caption read, "Family first. Always." Selina almost laughed. Always, only if it looked good in a photo. She didn't react. She didn't comment, didn't reach out. There was no need. The truth had already done its work. The empire they tried to build on status, silence, and spectacle was cracking. Selina no longer had to fight them. Life was handling that on its own. But she did remember. She remembered the ache in her knees on the cold marble floor, the feel of rain on her skin as she left that party alone, the way Sierra wouldn't even meet her eyes. Now that same sister was plotting behind her back, trying to manipulate her into handing over money, not out of reconciliation, but to secure property. Assets. Position. Selina walked into her home office, closed the door, and opened her laptop. She pulled up their latest balance sheet, solid, steady growth. The company was thriving. Malcolm and the team had just secured their 3rd commercial design project in a row. They were building something real. And Selina realized she no longer needed validation. She didn't even need revenge. She had clarity. Later that evening, as Tessa played in the backyard with Edgar and Ruth watching over her, Selena stood in the kitchen with a cup of tea. She looked out at her daughter, healthy, strong, and filled with questions about everything. She saw her husband in the distance laughing with their contractor about patio lights. That was her real family. The Hartleys were fading into the background, becoming characters in a story she had long outgrown. They could keep posting. They could keep pretending. But Selena no longer had anything to prove. What she had now was something they'd never understand: peace built on truth, not pretense. That morning began like any other. The light filtered softly through the curtains of Selena Hartley's office as she reviewed contracts at her desk. A fresh pot of coffee sat steaming beside her untouched. Her business, Reed plus Hart, had just secured a prestigious contract with a luxury hotel chain. Momentum was on her side. Yet her phone buzzed with a name she hadn't seen in half a decade: Eleanor Hartley. For a moment, Selena stared at the screen, unsure if she should answer. Curiosity, or perhaps old wounds, nudged her thumb forward. Selena, her mother's voice came through weak and strained. Selena didn't respond right away. The sound of her mother's voice was like a ghost trying to claw its way back into the present. But there was no emotion behind her silence. Just clarity. Selena, the bank. They're foreclosing on the house. We don't know what to do. We need $180,000 by the end of the month. Your father and we have nowhere else to turn. It was a full sentence, but it might as well have been a whisper into the past, echoing against the memory of cold champagne laughter and a $300,000 garden party held while her daughter fought for every breath in a hospital bed. Selena exhaled slowly. Do you remember what happened 5 years ago, Mother? Her voice was calm, like glass. On the other end, Eleanor sobbed. The years hadn't made her younger. Her voice trembled like a woman finally realizing the weight of 1,000 poor choices. Selena, please. We were wrong. We thought we were doing what was best for Sierra, for the family name. But now, we're about to lose everything. Your father's business partners pulled out. Jasper disappeared. And Sierra, she's moved out. It's just us. We have no one. Selena closed her eyes. 5 years ago she had stood drenched in rain, her knees aching on the marble tiles of their estate, begging for a fraction of the money they spent on Sierra's engagement gala. Her daughter's lungs were collapsing. Her pleas were met with silence, then dismissal, then laughter. And now they remembered her. Why now? Selena asked, almost more to herself than to Eleanor. Because you're the only one who can save us, Eleanor admitted. You built something incredible, Selena. Everyone's talking about your company, your awards. We never imagined this. And we know we don't deserve your help. But please, we're still your parents. Selena let the words hang in the air. She thought about her father, Gregory, who hadn't spoken to her since the night of Sierra's party. She thought about the way Jasper had sneered, had told her she had made her bed and now must lie in it. And she thought of Sierra, who had stood silent while her sister wept. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. Come to my company, she said. If you want to talk about help, we do it face to face. No phone calls, no middlemen. And I don't want to see Sierra, or Jasper, or your lawyer. Just you and Dad. Of course, Eleanor said quickly, as if the door hadn't already begun to close behind her. We'll be there. We'll come wherever you say. Selena ended the call and placed her phone back on the desk. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel vindicated. What she felt was controlled. This was no longer about pain or betrayal. It was about truth, about showing them what it looked like to live with dignity without cruelty. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't cry. She had done all of that already. Now it was their turn to sit in silence and feel what they had made. She buzzed her assistant. Block 2 hours on Friday afternoon. No interruptions. For family. She looked out the window for a long moment before answering. No. For closure. Selina stood in the center of her office, a place carved not out of privilege, but of persistence, grit, and defiance. Morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the brushed steel of the conference table and the polished edge of the leather chairs. The air was still but charged like the moments before a storm. She had spent the entire night preparing for this meeting. Every line rehearsed, every document reviewed, every emotion buried beneath the armor she'd built over 5 years of being forgotten, dismissed, and erased. At precisely 10 a.m., her assistant cracked the door open. "They're here," she said softly. Selina didn't flinch. "Let them in." Gregory and Eleanor Hartley shuffled in like shadows of the people she once knew. The years had been unkind. Her father's posture was slumped, his once commanding presence now reduced to a man crushed by the weight of pride and consequence. Her mother looked pale, her makeup unable to hide the desperation in her eyes. Neither dared to meet their daughter's gaze. They sat across from her in silence. No hugs, no smiles, only the sterile professionalism of a business negotiation. Between them sat a black suitcase. Selina unlatched it with a calmness that was almost cruel. She turned it toward them, flipped it open, and revealed 20 stacks of $100 bills. Exactly $200,000. Not a dollar more. Not a dollar less. Gregory's fingers twitched. "My lawyer has confirmed the foreclosure amount," Selina said evenly. "This should cover the debt and buy you time. That is, if you agree to my terms." Eleanor looked up startled. "Terms?" Selina reached for a crisp envelope and slid it across the table. "A statement," she explained. "You will sign this, both of you, and submit it publicly to the local paper and to the 3 business magazines you still subscribe to. It simply acknowledges that 5 years ago you knowingly chose your public image and your younger daughter's social elevation over the life of your grandchild. That when your daughter knelt before you, you turned away." Gregory's face twisted. "You want to humiliate us?" Selina met his eyes for the first time. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "No," she said. "I want you to tell the truth. The truth I lived. The truth you buried beneath your parties, your wine and your pride." Eleanor's lip trembled. She reached out for Gregory's arm. "Greg, please." But he was already seething. "You think because you've made some money, some name for yourself, you have the right to treat us like this." Selina leaned forward. Her words landed like stone. "You spent $300,000 to impress strangers. You let your own granddaughter lay on a hospital bed gasping for air while you toasted champagne under fairy lights. And now you come here hat in hand and expect mercy." Eleanor's tears fell freely now. "We made a mistake." "No," Selina interrupted, her tone sharp. "You made a choice, and now you live with it." Gregory stood suddenly, pushing the chair back, his face red, his voice shaking with fury. "We are still your parents." Selina pressed a button under the table. The door behind them creaked open. 2 members of the local press stepped inside, cameras in hand. One carried a microphone, the other a notepad. "This is Claire from Austin Tribune," Selina said, not even looking at her parents. "And David from Business Monthly. I thought it would be easier to release your statement with full transparency." Gregory looked as though he'd been struck. "You planned this," he whispered. Selina stood slowly, calm and tall in her black tailored suit. "Everything you taught me, presentation timing, impact, I learned it all from watching you destroy people's lives for the sake of perception. So yes, I planned this." Gregory's jaw clenched. Without another word, he snapped the suitcase shut and stormed out, brushing past the reporters without even glancing at them. Eleanor followed, sobbing, pausing at the door to look back at her daughter one last time. Selina didn't move. She waited until the door clicked shut. Only then did she allow herself to sit again. The silence in the room wrapped around her, not cold, but cleansing. Not empty, but complete. 5 years ago, she had knelt in the rain, humiliated and heartbroken, begging for her daughter's life. Today she had watched the very people who cast her out walk away carrying money, but not her forgiveness. Because money was replaceable, her dignity wasn't. And that was the most expensive lesson her parents would ever learn. Selina Hartley sat in the stillness of her office late into the evening, the weight of the day's confrontation still clinging to her like thick smoke. The image of her parents, hollowed, desperate, and defeated, replayed in her mind over and over again, not out of pity, but as a reminder of how far she had come. She had given them one last opportunity to face the truth they'd buried for 5 years, and as expected, they chose pride over redemption. But the chapter wasn't fully closed, at least not yet. That night after dinner, Selina walked into the hallway and overheard hushed voices. It was Tessa. She was sitting outside her bedroom door, curled into a blanket, whispering to her stuffed rabbit. Selina paused, the faint sound of her daughter's voice sending a chill through her spine. She stepped closer and heard Tessa say, "If I had died, would Grandma have cried?" The words were fragile but pierced deeper than any insult or betrayal Selina had ever received. Selina's heart seized in her chest. She approached quietly and knelt beside her daughter. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. Tessa looked up with those wide, searching eyes. "I heard you talking to Grandma," she said softly. She didn't sound sad, not even a little. Selina wrapped her arms around her daughter and held her tightly, unable to respond. What words could explain abandonment? What comfort could justify being treated as disposable? That moment, quiet, personal, and devastating, was the final straw. It wasn't anger that drove Selina's next decision. It was clarity. Her daughter had carried the memory of that day all these years. Even if she didn't understand every detail, she had absorbed the pain, the rejection, the coldness. And Selina realized protecting Tessa wasn't just about keeping her healthy. It was about freeing her from the shadow of a family that had failed her. The next morning, Selina called her real estate agent. "List the house," she said firmly. "All of it. I want nothing tying me to the Hartley name. Not even a foundation." She also began the process of relocating her company headquarters. The new office would bear no trace of the past. It would be a new space, a new identity built not out of defiance, but out of purpose. She called her legal team and instructed them to initiate complete privacy measures, new phone numbers, private mailboxes, restricted contact information. Even the school was notified with strict instructions to block any unapproved visitors. Selina wasn't just building walls. She was burning bridges she had once prayed would never collapse. That week, local media outlets picked up rumors of a public fallout involving the prestigious Hartley family. And when the details came to light about the hospital, the $120,000, the refusal, and the eventual plea for help, they spread like wildfire. The headline on the city's most read digital news site read, "The woman who refused her blood ties to keep a promise to her daughter." The article went on to highlight her company's growth, her contributions to charity, and her reputation as a woman who never forgot those who helped her, nor those who turned their backs. It wasn't a revenge piece. It was a profile in resilience, in maternal strength, in personal honor. Tessa saw the article, though Selina hadn't meant for her to. One night she found her daughter quietly staring at the screen. "That's you, right?" she asked. Selina nodded. "They say you're brave." Tessa smiled. "I think so too." It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was real. Selina didn't cry when she cut off her family. She didn't rejoice either. She simply moved forward, holding her daughter's hand, knowing full well that love is measured not by blood, but by actions. And sometimes protecting your child means teaching them that no one, not even family, has the right to harm them and stay. Selina Hartley stood quietly at the edge of the newly renovated lobby, her eyes sweeping across the room filled with warmth, laughter, and the people who had stood by her when the world had turned its back. Reed plus Hart Design had just opened its brand new headquarters, a sleek, light-filled building that once existed only as a sketch on a napkin between two dreamers, her and Malcolm. Every detail of the space, from the reclaimed wood beams to the brushed brass fixtures, whispered resilience and rebirth. This wasn't just a design firm. It was a symbol. A home built from ashes. She had personally invited every person who had helped her during her darkest hour, Ruth and Edgar now living comfortably in a guest wing of her home friends who once lent $20 or $50 without hesitation, and the quiet colleague who had once handed her a check without even asking why. No PR stunt, no press, just a quiet celebration of loyalty. As Selena took the stage, applause rippled through the crowd. She paused, her gaze resting on Tessa, now 8 years old, sitting in the front row between Malcolm and Ruth, legs swinging, eyes full of admiration. Selena took a deep breath and spoke with clarity that came only from surviving fire. "People often ask me what made me strong enough to do all this," she began, her voice steady. "But the answer is simple. I became this woman because 5 years ago I was on my knees and no one from my bloodline came to lift me up. No one, except the people who didn't share my name." There was silence, then murmurs of agreement. She continued, "Family isn't defined by genetics or a family crest on a gate. Family is defined by who shows up, by who says, 'We'll figure it out together,' when your world is falling apart." A hush fell over the room as two unexpected figures appeared near the back entrance, Gregory and Eleanor Hartley. Older, more fragile, and clearly out of place. Their expensive clothing couldn't mask the desperation in their posture. Gregory leaned on a cane. Eleanor held her purse tightly like a lifeline. They didn't come closer. They simply watched. Tessa spotted them first, her hand tightening around Ruth's fingers. Selena saw the flicker of recognition in her daughter's eyes, but didn't hesitate. She stepped down from the stage, took Tessa's hand, and walked straight past her estranged parents without slowing down, without a glance. There was no anger left in her, no bitterness. What remained was resolve. She didn't owe them fury anymore, just indifference. As she reached the exit, Tessa leaned into her and whispered, "Are they going to say sorry, Mommy?" Selena smiled, gently kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered back, "They already did when they showed up too late." Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long golden streaks across the sidewalk. Selena paused and looked up. The sky was clear. She breathed in deeply, holding her daughter close. The story didn't need more pages. It had already ended. Because family isn't where you're born. Family is where you're never abandoned. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you've made it this far, you've seen the weight of betrayal, the power of quiet resilience, and what it means to build something from nothing. Some say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes the people who share your blood are the very ones who leave you bleeding. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have helped the parents who turned their backs on your dying child? Would you have taken revenge or shown mercy? I want to hear your thoughts. Share your opinion in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if stories like this move you, if you believe in justice, redemption, and finding strength where no one expects it, then don't forget to subscribe. There's always another story waiting. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming someone they can never reach again. See you in the next one.